Hello, my friends. Andrew at Microphonic Designs here, welcoming you into 2021. I'm about 2 weeks late with a new video coming into the new year, but I have been busy for the last month. It's been a few weeks since I have done one of the sound design videos. If you're subscribed to the channel, you've probably seen a few other weird videos come out. I did some videos on the Yamaha DTX. I've got a few more of those coming up. And I've also uploaded my submission to the Berlin International Film Scoring Competition. So that has been sort of the big personal project that I've done over the last few weeks. I think the entry is actually today on January 15th, and since it is the due date for that, I've already turned mine in. I figured I would do a sort of a breakdown, deep dive session into my composition. Just for anyone that may be interested. And of course, I've had some other stuff going on, some actual client projects and different things going on. But for today, let's dive in to this project. So what I'm going to do first, I have up here on the screen, is the actual project itself. It's about 4.5 minutes. So if you've already seen this video that I've uploaded, feel free to skip ahead just a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and play it. We'll take a listen to it, and then we'll open up the Logic sessions and get in and break down all the music. So without further ado, let me go ahead and hit play. All right, so there we have it, and not too long of a film. The actual scoring portion was probably, about 3.5 minutes or so with the disclaimers and all that at the top. So let's get into this, and I'll share sort of what my process was and where maybe, some of the ideas came from and all that. And I when I first watched the supplied film, so when you enter this contest, they send a few things, and here's the folder that I downloaded. So there's the movie itself, and then you get the top 3, like the first, second, and third place winners from the sound design competition, which was held earlier in 2020. I think I ended up going with the first place, the one by Luca Pestarini. I hope I said that right. Don't call me out too hard on that. But yeah, so they send the film, and it doesn't have any audio to start with. Again, so that you can choose what sound design track you want, and so that you can, of course, score the music for it. So in watching this short film, I knew that I wanted to, like, the overall idea that I had right from the get-go was come up with a theme that is mostly synthetic, so like a lot of synthesizer sounds, because to me it's a machine, it's a robot going to a desolate planet. I didn't want to use traditional orchestral sounds during this first real big chunk of the movie. And so when we get to this part where the machine powers up and it shoots down and this giant tree grows out, this is where I wanted to come in with the classical sounds, the strings, the horns, choir, and all that stuff, so that those actual real-life instruments reflect life growing on this planet. And then towards the end is sort of a reprise of the very beginning motif. And the motif was sort of the first thing that I noodled around on the keyboard to find it, to sort of figure out what I wanted to do. But before we get too far into all that, let's actually open up a Logic session, and I'm hoping that these will open up fine. I actually had them on my solid state drive and moved them to my archive hard drive. So let's see. So there were 3 Logic sessions that I used to create all of this. The first was this one, just labeled Abiogenesis, and then I got like 2/3 of the way through and didn't want to have a ton of VST instruments playing, so I did a lot of bounce in place. In any case, let me open this up and we'll just take a look at what we've got. And there's a few things that I'll point out to begin with as soon as this loads up. All right, so here we are for real. And it's a lot going on. This is just sort of the first half. When we get to the second Logic session, you'll see all the stuff towards the end. But the first thing I did before putting any notes down or coming up with anything was I went through and I did a classic like spotting session where I just went through and marked up so like all of these colored little sections at the top. All of my colored markers are just different points in the film where I saw, like I just wanted to take notes, and there was a lot of them. And one of the handy tips that I learned about with doing this really for the first time was doing a SMPTE lock. So if you come over here to the list view and you go into the marker area, you can actually, right click or control click and lock the SMPTE position for markers that you haven't locked. By default, they're unlocked. And what that means is that, as you're changing tempos and stuff like that, the markers, if they're not locked in with the SMPTE position, they will move, and all of the work that you did spotting the movie will have been for nothing. So you have to make sure you go in and lock these things up so that they don't move in relation to like the actual movie and the time code. So a lot of notes were taken and color-coded before I did anything. And once I did that, I took a day or two and just sort of noodled around. And I was looking for sounds that in my head fit what was going on in the movie. And so I've got 2 instances of Omnisphere going on here. A lot of Omnisphere instruments. I brought in a marimba sound for whenever we get like the little mosquito robot things get to the pools of water. So we'll open this up. So like when they get to the water pond things, I brought in a marimba sound just because, and it's a heavily processed marimba sound, but the water kind of made me think of that instrument. But a lot going on down here with the Omnisphere patches. And in fact, the last sound design video I did was coming up with the synthetic growth sound effect that I actually used throughout this piece. And in the beginning here, this is where we get that, this is like the ship entering the atmosphere of the planet. Yeah, so there it is, that synthetic growth. Oh boy, and it sounds totally wacky because the third Logic session that I did was a mix session, and we'll get into that. But yeah, the whole piece is centered around F minor. For all of you music theory folks out there, and we sort of play around with that a lot, and the different time signatures in my head represented the different things that were going on. So like the main spaceship theme is in 4, and then when the pods shoot out, we go into 3. The wings deploy, we go into 5/8. We go into a few bars of 5, and then again we focus on the just the pods. We're in 3 again. I did this groove when the pods transform. So when they're like, getting onto their wheels and stuff, we do this sort of 4/4/7/8 groove to sort of elude that I guess this version of the pods are returning to the ship, and we kind of go into 3 again, because they're still in pod formation, and then they get back to the ship and we get into 4 and some stuff changes. So it was a challenge in my head because a lot of this is basically everything from when the ship lands on the planet and then the pods deploy. It's all, to me, pretty high energy. Like these machines are on a mission, to collect samples of water or whatever it is, and they're going, right? So it was difficult to sort of maintain that energy for such a long period of time. And one of the interesting things that I ended up doing was a tempo change snuck in here. So basically, for the bulk of this, we're at 100, and it sort of floats around 100 beats per minute. And then it jumps to 135, and I did that by going in here with, it was an Omnisphere patch. Yeah, supermassive depths. So basically with this, let me see if here it is. So basically what I ended up doing was putting these. So I've got these, what is it, a dotted 8th note. And it sort of builds and grows into the sound. And then I just made the quarter note over here when the pods transform. I took the quarter note and basically equaled that to the dotted 8th note. So basically, if we were to think of these dotted 8th notes as quarter notes, that's what I changed the tempo to. So it sort of sneaks in and made for a really smooth transition. So it kept a similar energy when the drums come in and the pods are like in driving mode, but it's a different tempo, still a different feel, especially with the different time signatures thrown in there. So I thought that was a really interesting way to transition from, this 3/4 feel that we have into, first of all, a different tempo, and then also a slightly different time signature. So let me play this section one more time, and keep an ear out for these dotted 8ths here. So there's that main motif we'll get into in a second. And there's that dotted 8th note. And right here is sort of where that tempo change occurs. So that was a lot of fun to do. Like I said, the main feel of this whole thing is centered around F minor. I found this patch in Omnisphere called Fair and Square, and it's sort of this sine wave based thing. Let's take a look at it. We'll open up Omnisphere here. So I had that in part 3. So Fair and Square, lead 1, I say sine and it's a square wave. I say that like an idiot. But to me, it fit the parts, and I came up with this just going up the F minor scale, and that kind of became the main theme and motif for this whole thing. And we hear that in different ways. Like, we hear the same notes, but in different contexts throughout this whole thing. So, like, right off the bat in the very beginning, you know, we have it just straight in 4/4, as that represents the ship as a whole. And you could also go so far as to say, well, there's 4 pods on it, but that wasn't really where I was coming from. And then we also hear that... you know, we sort of hear a similar thing in the 3/4 and 5/8, but I do bring it back when the pods collect water. We just hear a slightly different instrumentation with it, so I actually put that down in these pluck sounds. So that was a lot of fun to put that in 3, and then we also did it in, or I also did it in the 7/8 bars, more or less as sort of an embellishment to what was going on. But again, we're exploring that same motif because of what's going on, and all of the context around that motif changes to represent what else is going on. So like here again, we'll hear that same thing in 4, right? And then we hear it in 3 over here. Yeah. And then we sort of hear it in a different way in the 4/4-7/8 groove. And then finally we get to this sort of transition section. It took me a couple days of sort of sitting on it and thinking about, like, how do I, like, where do I go with this in terms of, like, I've got this real energetic groove going on, and I sort of came to the conclusion that, hey, you know, I think I want to slowly transition out of that into sort of a more open feeling part, and I guess what I mean by that is, like, sort of a segment that doesn't really feel like it has time, if that makes any sense, and that it sort of slows down. So that's where I brought in this patch, Sacred Shrine, and it's the very first instrument that we hear in the whole piece. So again, it's also tying it together with what's going on, right? So we've got this sound in the very beginning, and we see this ship flying through space to this planet. We hear the sound, and then... You know, so let me back up. We hear this sound. We know that the ship is on a mission of some sort, and then I wanted to bring that back again to sort of remind the viewer that the ship is on a mission. And then finally, we actually resolve to a major chord, a couple major chords here, as this mountain is shown for the first time and kind of revealed. So as the video pans over to this mountain, we sort of get this a bit of a resolution. I think I kept it within that F minor scale, but it resolved to I'm pretty sure I just did F major. I can't quite remember, but let me play it for you. You'll see what I'm talking about. So this is just after that exciting groove. You'll hear it transition to 4/4, and then as that mountain reveals, again, we get sort of a different sort of resolution over here. So there's that main motif again. Here's the first major chord. Sticking with the same motif, but we know something different's coming up. And we see the mountain. So this last sort of segment here, that last motif that we heard in the ambient space piano here, was a major scale iteration of the main motif. So instead of going up the minor scale, I went up the major scale. Oops. and still ended on that, it would be a lowered seventh. So it's the seventh in the minor chord, so we kept that the same, but I changed these first 4 steps to be major intervals to really drive the fact that something different is coming up, something that we're looking forward to. Perhaps it's the goal of the mission. And then I left it blank for a little while. So you'll see there's no more music in this session. And this is kind of the point where I was like, all right, I need to bounce all of these tracks in place to reduce CPU. And so I did that. So let me close this up. And I will open up, I will open up the second session, which was the Abiogenesis BIP bounce in place. Let's get this opened up. All right, so here we go. I've got the second version of the Abiogenesis Logic session opened up. And as you'll see here, all of these audio files are the BIPs, the BIPs, whatever you call them, the files from the bounce in place from the session we were just in. So if you right click on a MIDI region, you can look for bounce in place right here, and it'll spit out one of these. And again, I wanted to do that just to make sure that my CPU was not getting too overworked. There's a few things that were still left, especially towards the end. I brought in some of the original sounds towards the end of the film, again, as sort of a reprise to the main intro that we heard as the ship was leaving the planet. So that's what some of this stuff is down here, and I had to bounce them in place again to make sure that these were going to be in the right spot for the mixing session that I ended up doing as well. And here, again, we go into the 4/4. We have that big sort of resolution when the ship is walking up the mountain. And then we get into the point where it's, it powers up and it shoots down and it grows this tree. And so this is where we see the full sort of classical orchestral sounds come in. And I did a lot with these sounds after I exported everything for the mixing session. Because it just was not big enough. I ended up compressing the heck out of a bunch of this stuff to get this real sort of in-your-face sound for the choir and the horns and the strings and all that. Found some really cool patches in the 80 Voices of Wind, or Voice of Wind 80. This is what it looks like from Native Instruments in the Complete Control plugin. Found some really neat patches. And so that's where I got some of that ethereal sounding vocal work. Pulled in another 80 patch, a third 80 patch, really used the 80 sounds. And then also brought in just some ensemble legato choir as well to fill some of the gaps, glue stuff together. And then we've got again, just violins, violas, cellos, double bass, trumpets, horns, trombones, tubas. And all I did was, for this first big build, right here, I think is where it hits. Yeah, count 4, bar 94. So 80 comes in. We hear her. And then I used Rise and Hit and Thrill from Native Instruments. So it's just one big F major chord, again, changing the scale up to reflect what's going on, because this is a real grandiose moment, right? So we basically ride that F major chord, and I used this sort of this step pattern again to reflect the main motif of the whole piece, just this time in major scale. And then over here, there's another sort of tension that like I build the tension a little bit with Thrill one more time, and then some I think it's called tremolo in the strings. And then we see another iteration of the main motif, but this time it builds into an A flat major chord. So basically, I played around with the A major scale during this stuff, and I transitioned with that back into the F minor. So if you're hip to music theory, basically I just used the A major scale and then kind of changed some chords, and that landed us back on the F minor, which was the original scale, so it fits. So what that allowed me to do was hit that F major and use a key change here when the tree comes out, and then we do another key change, so it's the same feel. It's I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. It's the same feeling, but a slightly different sound. So again, F major going up to A flat major, and then this set me up to go back into the F minor, which is all this stuff here, which was the very end, right? So that's the F minor, and then there's the main motif. So I was really happy with that. I've been studying music theory from what's his name, Professor Jay Allen. He's got a bunch of stuff. I think his website is called punkademic.com, but I've got a bunch of his courses on a website called Udemy. I've been studying music theory. I took his film scoring and music composition courses on there. They were great, and a lot of these things I learned from that course. And of course, towards the end, again, we're using that fair and square lead sound. And this time, you'll notice there's some shifts in that main motif, right? Let me see if I can find where I actually wrote that. It might be in the hidden tracks. Yeah, here we go. So in this, because the spaceship is leaving the planet, whereas the original motif was walking up the minor scale, this time I walked it down the minor scale. And then I did a pattern shift where I put the 16th notes leading into sort of the main minor resolution there. I moved those from beat 1 to beat 4, which again sort of gives a feeling of finality to the whole thing, in my head anyway. And I don't know, it worked out really well. I'm real proud of it. We're not going to find out the results until March 1st of 2021, I do believe. So if you're watching this video after that, we'll know who won. But for now, it's just my first real try and attempt at scoring a movie, in this case a very short film, and I'm real proud of it. So let me show you next. Oh, and this was like this was the mixer. It got a little crazy, and what I'm going to show you lastly here, I know this video is getting a little long, is the actual mixing session that I put together. So I exported everything, every track as an audio file, and it allowed me to go in and actually mix everything. Okay, so here it is, and you know what? I may have to find all of the audio files. Give me just a second, because I moved hard drives. All right, and real quick, because I'm having to put this session back together, here are all of the files, all of the exported files for Mixdown. So let me re-import these to my session real quick, and then we'll take a look at what that actually looked like inside the DAW. Okay, so here we go. It messed up a little bit, I think, but this will give you the general idea. Basically, I imported everything into Logic and had it all lined up. It looks like it mostly is. Yeah, I mean, what this allowed me to do is go in and, add compression to a lot of stuff. I mean, I put compression and EQ on a lot of the orchestral instruments to have maximum control over that. There was a lot of automation that went on to make sure that things were balanced just right. And it was a lot of fun, actually going in and mixing a project instead of trying to do it all with the MIDI notes and all that. I highly recommend using, so if you go up to File, if you're a Logic Pro 10 user, you can go up to File, you can hit Export, and there's a bunch of different export options. The one that I use in this case is all tracks as audio files. You could even do selected tracks as audio files, but that allows you to do a big export like this of all your instruments at once. And when you do that, you can actually do it so that it names each file after the track name, which is real handy, and even the track number, which is how I kept everything in order instead of having the Finder alphabetize everything. And yeah, that was it. Once I got done mixing it, I exported it to the movie, and that's what we watched earlier. So please leave comments and questions, or any of that down below. If you've got thoughts on any of it, I'm happy to elaborate on stuff in the comment section if there's a particular thing that you have a question on, or even suggestions on how you went about this, if you competed in this contest, or if you've got like workflow tips, feel free to share them. But I'm real proud of this project. Took me a long time. All in all, I probably spent about 20 hours on it, is my best guess. I didn't really keep track of it, but again, I wanted a nice first portfolio project under my belt, which I definitely think this is. The entry. I think it was here in the U.S. It was about $60 or so to enter the contest and get the files and all that, and just to have a solid portfolio item worth the cash for sure, because that financial investment really made me want to work on this and do well. So if you haven't just yet, do consider subscribing to the channel. I took a bit of a break in December for a host of reasons, but I'm getting back into the swing of things here with this video. I hope you enjoyed. Ended up being a bit of a long video. My apologies, but I hope you found it interesting. I am getting a lot more getting into film scoring, composition, and all that a lot more. In addition to the sound design videos, I'll probably be doing those a little bit less as I introduce more of this style of content as well. But I hope you enjoy. If you subscribed for the sound design stuff, hopefully, this is cool to see that sound design in practice. And as I go forward, I'm just excited to share my journey with everyone out there. So again, do consider subscribing. It's really motivating for me to see. Drop the like on the video if you learned anything new, or if it was interesting, or you know the deal. So until next time, I will see you later. Take it easy, and thanks again for taking some time to hang out with me. And as I show the tour of my Abiogenesis contest entry. Thanks again. I'll see you later.